Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to build a productive daily routine step by step and give you all the information you actually need to go and create one for yourself that actually works consistently long term instead of just working for like a week with basically just willpower and then completely failing after that. And so the first thing is your routine is basically just a reflection, or it should be a reflection of your priorities. And what I mean by that is that you should put your highest priority tasks earlier in the day or when you generally have more focus and more energy for them. And so what that actually looks like in a more actionable way is, for example, doing deep work first thing. And that links into your morning routine, okay? And that's sort of the second part of doing this is actually like morning routine. And the mindset that I have around morning routines is that they should basically prepare you for deep work as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And so what that basically means, I'll draw this little like symbol so that that's as much as possible as quickly as possible. Actually, I need to scroll down a bit. Basically, as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And so this just means that you want your routine to be morning routine, right? To be very, very short, but very effective. And so that means it should generally include things like a cold shower, possibly things like sunlight, hydration. And I know you've probably heard all of these before, but there are other parts of your morning routine, maybe let's say you do reading or you exercise, things like that, that I think actually aren't the best to do first thing. And that just comes back to how you want to have your priorities basically reflected into your routine by doing deep work or whatever your main priority is. Maybe your main priority at this time is just exercise, and so you do that, replace that with deep work, of course. But just for the example of this, generally it's going to be deep work for most people. And so you want your morning routine to be very, very short, let's say like 15 to 30 minutes, and it should basically just prepare you for deep work, like I said, as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And so what my morning routine actually looks like is I basically wake up, make my bed, open my curtains, drink some water, have a cold shower, and then get to deep work. That is literally it, and it takes around this time frame of the 15 to 30 minutes. And so you want to create a routine that's like that and try and postpone things that are lower priority, even if they are productive or even if they are healthy or things you want to do or your habits. You want them to be later in the day because you basically just want to cut down the delay between when you wake up and when you get to deep work. And coming back to deep work, doing deep work first thing, you also want to eat the frog. And what that means, as you might already know, is that you want to do your most difficult, highest leverage, most important task first thing in the morning, the first thing you work on, and you basically just work on it until it's completed. And so the idea of eating the frog, like where that actually came from, is basically that if you were given an entire day to eat a frog, the best strategy is probably just to try and eat it first thing, just get it out of the way so that you don't have to worry about it and stress about it all the way until the end of the day, which will ultimately make actually eating it harder because your brain is going to keep thinking about it and sort of over exaggerating how bad it's going to be. And so the same thing applies to your tasks. If you have a big task that's quite difficult, but it's going to get you some good returns, you should try and do it first thing, because if you procrastinate it basically until the end of the day and postpone it, then your mind is basically just going to keep looping over and over again and thinking about like, oh, this task is so difficult, it's so bad, it takes so much effort, and that causes it to actually feel more difficult than it is. And that's why you want to really just do the hardest thing first, and that's why your morning routine should be short to get you to doing that most difficult thing as quickly as possible that gets you the highest returns. Now, this also allows you to basically make sure that even if things go wrong later in the day, at least you got your most important thing done first. So extremely, extremely important though. Then three, the rest of your routine should basically be, with your priorities in order, obviously a reflection of your priorities, coming back to that, but then based around your energy levels. So energy and focus fluctuation. Because I'm sure you know that sometimes in the day, you're just more focused or more energized than other times. And this also applies to specific tasks. And so what I mean by that, by specific tasks, is that energy and focus, it's not just like I feel energized or I feel focused at this time and at this other time I don't. It's more like how energized or focused do I feel for a certain task at this certain time. And so you'll need a bit of trial and error and a bit of just experimenting to figure this out. But generally, what you'll find is there'll be certain blocks, let's say like in the afternoon is quite a common one, sort of after lunch, where you just feel less energized or less focused. And so you really don't want to be scheduling, for example, deep work at that time. And instead, possibly you schedule rest so that you're doing it every day at the time when you actually need it. And obviously you'll find the specific times for this over time. And that actually brings us on to the fourth part, which is adaptation, which is really just that you want to keep changing your routine. Not all the time, obviously, you don't want to be changing it every day or every week or even every month, but you want to be making small changes when you figure out things aren't working. And so 3 and 4 are very strongly linked because they basically, your energy and your focus, and when you feel like you can do tasks the best, is going to change over time as your tasks change as well, obviously. And so you need to keep adapting your routine to actually accommodate for that. And so let's say with deep work, coming back to this, and your morning routine, maybe you figure out that over time something changes and you need to do deep work first thing, yes, but then at a different time when you normally do deep work, maybe that stopped working as well because you had to add in a certain habit or another responsibility. And so then your energy and focus changes later in the day because of that impact. And so then you actually have to adapt your routine. And like I said, though, you don't want to be doing this very frequently because you don't want to just be making changes for the sake of making changes, basically. Because obviously that isn't going to work very well. If you're just changing stuff all the time, you're never actually going to get to the point where you've stuck to your routine and where it actually becomes a routine. Because a routine is really just the things that you do every day. And so right now, yes, you probably do have a routine, but maybe it just isn't actually the one that you want to have. And so you want to be adapting your routine, but not very frequently. So maybe this is just whenever something actually doesn't work, like to give you like whenever a problem actually comes up, that gives you a reason to have a routine change. And so you need a reason to change. You don't want to just be changing it completely randomly because you feel like it or because your routine sort of got difficult, because difficulty isn't the sign that you need to change. It's more that like something actually is not working in terms of energy or focus, or you can't do your highest priority tasks or your habits you really want to do. So those are basically the first four parts of creating a routine. And obviously these have more detailed steps within them, such as with the first step, coming back to that. This is going to basically be like your entire day with all your habits, all your meals, your exercise, everything. It should be a reflection of your priorities chronologically. So like throughout the day, you should basically do on average more difficult things first, more important things first, and then slowly throughout the day they get less difficult and less important to basically accommodate for your energy and focus decreasing on average throughout the day. But sometimes obviously there's going to be timing points where you can't just make it completely chronological, where the first thing you do is the highest priority, and the second thing is the second highest priority, and the third thing is the third highest priority. Maybe it has to be sort of, like number one priority, then your number three priority, then your number two, then number five, then number four, or whatever. And that is fine. It doesn't always obviously have to be exactly like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just you want it to generally be in order of highest priority first. But of course, there are going to be some cases, such as if you have to do exercise and you go at a certain time to like the gym or whatever, and then you can't do that before the tasks that are a bit low priority, so you just schedule it, so you flip those around, is not the end of the world, obviously. Right, and so all of this brings us on to probably the last thing I'm going to talk about for routines, which is just a very, very simple thing and kind of comes back to energy and focus fluctuation. And it's basically just the concept of buffer time. And what this means is that you want to leave time in your routine where you basically plan to do nothing. And obviously that doesn't really sound too productive at, first glance. It's like, why would you plan to do nothing? You should be planning to do everything at all times. But actually there's a very, very good reason for this. And it basically comes back to how the amount of time it takes you to do certain tasks isn't going to be the exact same every day. We are not machines, we're humans, and so we can't do tasks to the second or to the minute every single day. It just doesn't work like that because there's so many different things that are going to be impacting your focus and your energy and what the task actually is. And so let's say you have a 2 hour deep work block every single morning, but one day you go a bit over that 2 hours because you had a task that just had to get done. Like it was basically a non-negotiable for a certain deadline, had to be done. And so you just had to keep working for a longer amount of time. And because you're not a machine, you couldn't just get it done in the same amount of time. That's where buffer time actually comes in, because a really big problem with routines is that they are very, very structured, almost too far in some cases, because what happens is if you don't stick to your routine, let's say you're like, you wake up a little bit late, and then you'll start your morning routine a little bit late, and then it takes a little bit longer because you're tired, and then your first deep work block you start like 10-15 minutes late, and then because you are a bit less tired, maybe you got worse sleep, then that actually ends up being 30 minutes longer than you expected, and then that just sort of snowballs throughout the day until it ends. You basically end the day getting a lot less done. Maybe you skipped an entire deep work block or a workout or something. And so that's such a big problem that we do really need to solve, and buffer time is a very, very simple but very effective way to solve it. And basically, like I said, it's what you want to plan out times when you're doing nothing. And how this works is for tasks when you sometimes go over the amount of time you planned, but sometimes don't. For example, with deep work, when your tasks may change day to day, that's when you want to put buffer time after. And so maybe in your schedule, we just have like a block here. Let's say this is like deep work, and maybe that's like 2 hours. And then what we would have had before is straight after, I don't know, let's say that this is, actually I'll make that a bit shorter. Let's say this is like a workout, and then straight after again, more deep work, right? And basically, we're just assuming that there is absolutely no time between these blocks. Let's say this is, it's 2 hours. Let's say we could write in some times here. Maybe it starts at like 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and then that's 12 p.m. to like 1 p.m. and then that's 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. There's no time between any of these. And so what you basically want to do instead is basically get these and move them down a little bit. And then you do the same for this block possibly. And these gaps that we've got here would be about 15 minutes. And that means that with the tasks that actually do go a bit longer on some days but not on others, such as deep work in most cases, you actually have this, which is the buffer time here. This here is the buffer time. Let's say on this deep work block it was supposed to take 2 hours, but then for whatever reason you had to actually keep working for another 10 minutes, then you still don't go into the next time block. You've got that buffer time, and then you get a 5-minute break, and then you go into the next block. And that basically just allows you to remove that snowballing effect of being late for one task to then the next and the next and the next, and sort of allows you to cut it off as soon as possible. And with actually figuring out what specific tasks for you want to add in buffer time for, it kind of comes back to trial and error again and the adaptation over time, right, which is the fourth thing. And an important thing to note is that for tasks that always go over, like you always spend more time on, you don't want to add buffer time. You literally just want to give yourself longer for the task. And then if you give yourself longer, and sometimes you go over, sometimes you don't, that's when you want to add in buffer time. If you're going over every time still and you're spending longer, then you increase the time again. While also keeping in mind that you want to use basically, Parkinson's law, where you want to try and get the task done in as little time as possible, obviously. But sometimes it is actually realistic to just increase the amount of time that you're giving yourself to do a task if it literally, you cannot do it. You've never done it in the time that you're giving yourself. So that's basically buffer time. So basically what you want to do is actually use these steps when creating your routine so that it's a reflection of your priorities first, and then you add in a morning routine to prepare you for those priorities as much as possible, as quickly as possible. You then adapt, right? Adaptation and 3 and 5 are actually very strongly linked, because you adapt your routine based on your energy and focus to make sure that you're actually focused as much as possible for specific tasks, and maybe shift around meal times, or when you do your habits, or when you do deep work and those kinds of things, as well as adding in buffer time where it's needed as you adapt as well. And that allows you to basically create a routine over time that actually allows you to make progress towards your priorities without spending 2 hours on your morning routine, actually feel focused and energized when you need to for certain tasks, and make sure that you keep adapting it over time when needed so that you keep making progress when your goals, priorities, and certain tasks actually shift. And if you do want a bit more information about routines or planning or tracking or any other kinds of productivity advice, then I actually have a link in the description for my free course, which you do have to put in like a phone number, but you can fake that if you really want to. And you can get that completely free. Obviously, no pressure if you don't want to, that's completely fine. Have an amazing rest of your day.